Hi, I'm Nicole Ferraro, and this is The Divide, a podcast from Light Reading exploring the ongoing digital divide, why and where it still exists, and what needs to be done to get people everywhere connected to reliable, high-speed internet. Today, for something different, we are hosting a roundtable discussion on the subject of broadband permitting, specifically discussing how delays in the permit process impede ISPs' efforts to deliver broadband access in a timely fashion, or sometimes at all, and what policy changes are needed in order to address that. My guests today are Pamela Sherwood, Vice President of the Regulatory Compliance and Broadband Office at Brightspeed, Jessica Epley, Vice President of Regulatory and External Affairs for Epley Fiber, and Brad Welch, Chief Operating Officer at CentraCom and Mayor of Fairview, Utah. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining me today. To start us off, I just want to go around and have you each briefly introduce yourselves and your companies, including where you deliver service and your general reach. Let's start with Pamela, then go to Brad, and then finish up with Jessica.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for having us. Such a pleasure to have a conversation with you today. So Brightspeed's investing in broadband deployment across the communities that need better connectivity. We have a footprint that encompasses 20 different states. Many of those are rural and smaller markets that the customers and the residents there don't currently have access to the high-speed fiber broadband services. To date, we passed more than 3 million locations with fiber to the home, and our residents in our footprint are ready for fiber. The most common question I get asked is when they'll get fiber in the neighborhood, and it's a tough question to answer, one that we'll talk about today, which includes the fact that broadband deployment is only as fast as the slowest permit in the project.
All right, over to you, Brad.
Perfect. Thank you for the opportunity. Brad Welch. I am with CentraCom. We are a subsidiary of LACT Corporation. We have operations in California, Oregon, New Mexico, Utah, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, New Hampshire, kind of spread out everywhere. And I will tell you an interesting statistic that I think is important. Utah is 66% federal land, and Kansas is 0.5% federal land. So very wide varieties of permitting issues, especially federal, but once again, tribal, railroad, power lines, BLM, all those other things. And so we have an obligation, we feel, to get to these remaining unserved, underserved locations with adequate service. And we have actually walked away from fully funded, with grants, private money, all of that after attempting permitting for 2+ years, right? So
Wow.
That's kind of a tee up.
Yeah, excellent. All right, Jessica.
Well, I'm the tiny company on this call today, which is interesting. Colleagues, Epley Fiber operating here in the Pacific Northwest. We have big dreams and big goals to get beyond our 4 states of Idaho, Montana, Oregon, and Washington. Looking at expanding so that we can get to somewhere around 3 million locations passed here pretty rapidly, and then scaling up to 8 million locations passed with fiber shortly thereafter. So lots of issues with permitting and all the wonderful things that my friends have already described, and then a little bit more.
Absolutely. Thank you all. That was great. So as mentioned, this is a digital divide podcast, and deploying fiber in a timely fashion is a digital divide issue. So let's talk about some of the problems to start off associated with filing for and obtaining permits for broadband projects. Permit reform has obviously been a key objective for the telecom industry for a while, and some legislation on that matter is moving through Congress at the moment, TBD where it goes. But let's start with the problems. I'd love to hear from each of you on what some of the biggest barriers have been when it comes to obtaining necessary permits for broadband deployment projects. What are some examples you can share of how this has led to deployments being delayed or canceled? And Brad is alluding to this a little bit, but I'd love to hear about how these challenges differ when we're talking about federal land versus public land. Jessica, let's start off with you this time.
Awesome. Thanks. So, it's kind of a twofold problem. It's not just an issue of the timeline that it takes to get a permit, but it's also the variance in requirements between one jurisdiction to the next. And then just the administrative process itself. Permit fees, like beginning at the most material cost driver, right? We have permit fees that range from a couple $100 to $30,000 for a single project that's covering 200 homes. $30,000, like that is extraordinary. And if we want to talk about reasonable cost driven expenses, it's hard to justify $30,000 for 200 homes is really cost based. A couple of other issues we have found is cities don't have good records of their underground utilities. And so we have one city that has come to us and said, guess what? If you're going to submit for a permit, you have to pothole and give us the depths of every single underground utility for the entirety of your project area. We're going to create Swiss cheese before we've even gotten a permit to put fiber in the ground. I mean, and for a disruption that really doesn't have a net benefit either to the network that's being deployed or to the community. Depths of our installation. Some cities understand fiber is glass, right? You're not going to get electrocuted if you chop through it. You're probably going to make your neighbors a little bit mad, but it's a relatively easy fix. But we have some cities that are saying we want you down at 48 inches, and in order to cross underneath all of the maze of utilities that are underground, you have to vacuum out all of those spoils once you have a very large open trench cut, and it becomes cost prohibitive to put fiber in the ground. That's just a couple. I'm sure my colleagues have. I have one more. This one blew my mind. So we have one city. It's a very small town. I'll leave the state off, but they came back to us and said, even though you're only building like 5,000 locations, we need to look at each one of your 200 location project areas on a per street basis. So a single project has 13 permits to cover 200 locations. I mean, just creates volume of paperwork and chaos, frankly, that just makes it untenable for us to deploy in a reasonable fashion.
Okay, that's super helpful. All right, Pamela, let me come to you next to jump in there.
I'll echo what Jessica's saying.
Okay.
It is not just about the timing and the cost. It's that it isn't linear and it isn't predictable. And it takes a lot of work to get all the right-of-way permits, the railroad, the underground approvals, the aerial authorizations before construction ever begins. So let me give you a couple timelines that sort of put it all in perspective. Yeah. Because when we've got a grant project and we have to do it in 2 years or 4 years, these timelines really become amplified. So, for example, in our experience, when we're asking to be on a pole, we have to go get authorization from like the investor-owned traditional electric utility pole. And their permits usually take between 10 to 15 months, depending on the size and the complexity, depending on how big it is. They may only process a certain amount of permits each month. So that gets even pushed out further when you've got a really big project. And then when you run into railroad, right, you also have another 8 to 26 months added to the project once you've got your network all constructed and you're waiting just to cross a railroad to get to the customers on the other side. And then if you've got underground work, it depends on the particular state. But what we see is there's a lot of variance between districts in a state. So while one may have standards that say, I only need this, another county or municipality or district will ask for a lot more. And those can range from 6 months to a year to even more, depending on the type of requirements. So let me give you an example of like how one size fit all requirements don't always work. We were working in a Texas community, and the pole owner has a requirement that every permit that you submit to them for a pole attachment has to have a professional engineer stamp it, and it has to be developed with bonded contractors. Now, Brightspeed does a lot of aerial deployments, which means we're just overlashing to our existing network that's on the pole, right? Simple, easy, doesn't burden the pole anymore. Usually just the notice and go. And And in this Texas community, they were requiring a PE stamp that affected over 100 permits and over 20,000 locations that couldn't get our broadband because we were stuck in this cycle of having to go back and redo everything with a professional engineer. So one size fit all requirements don't always work when it might be appropriate for a complex build, but for something very simple, it causes delay and additional fees.
Yeah. Okay. Brad, do you want to chime in on this? And do you have an alternate perspective at all as a city mayor?
Well, we'll go with concurring with everything first and then adding to it, and then we get to the city mayor perspective. Yeah, when you bring up the railroad, no difference in permitting if we're paralleling the railroad, if we're crossing under it. I mean, if you're paralleling it and they have a right-of-way that's 30 feet away from the track, but we're still having to go through the exact same process. One thing that's unique with railroads a lot of times, well, two things. One, your permit often is based on the number of fiber that are in the count of the cable that you're putting in per foot. Mm-hmm. So that's the cost. Tell me that has anything to do with what the right-of-way is worth. And the insurance you have to buy is sold by the railroad. So, I mean, that's a fun one. The other part on the pole attach, to Pamela's point, you're really lucky in all the other places that it is just a permit and go, because that's not what we see in most of ours. It is a heck of a process, loading of the new cable on the pole, all of those types of things. And even on poles where we exist and we're in compliance, a term that you may or may not know, make ready. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, this pole is now worth $12,000 to replace. And it's 100% your responsibility, even if it's rotted off at the bottom. And so they're just, we laugh about them because otherwise you'll cry. But the DOTs in Utah, and we have a great relationship with our Department of Transportations where we parallel the roads. There's 4 different regions. All 4 of them require different things. And they're good to work with, right? Like, they really are good to work with, but this requires a PE stamp on every page. This requires just on these. And then just a little bit on the federal, which I think good progress is being made on the federal in policy. The problem is we'll see what happens from when policy goes to implementation, because you can have great policy, but the permit that I had for 2 years that was totally a public safety permit, BLM, trying to get on an existing pole line, there would have been no disruption to any dirt in the ground. 2 years, we finally gave up and went back to the provider because we were trying to reach a cell tower, 911 in an area that doesn't have it. People die. It's a recreational area that people are wrecking on side-by-sides. We worked really hard. We finally gave up because they couldn't hire a real estate person in the course of 2 years. And so the permit sat because they just didn't hire a real estate person. No other reason. I will say most of our local offices want to be helpful. They really do. And when we go back to DC and advocate, they really want to understand and do things that make sense. It's how it gets to actually work.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Super helpful. And just a quick follow-up briefly, have these problems prevented you all from completing federally funded, granted projects in time? And are you worried about, you've all won BEAD money, congratulations. Are you worried about fulfilling your BEAD obligations if some of these issues aren't addressed? We'll go Jessica, Pamela, and then Brad.
Absolutely. The BLM issue that Brad just described, in railroads issues, and yes. Pole owners do not understand or have the same sense of urgency, and it's a patchwork as to whether or not you're dealing with a regulated utility or not, right? Because if it's not investor owned, cooperatives and public utility districts, they have zero oversight typically and have zero reason to want to be engaged in these conversations because this is just an impediment to what they want to do. So it's this really interesting dance, dealing with municipalities specifically on permits. Yes, I mean, we're seeing NEPA and SEPA and state historic preservation office requirements on previously disturbed right of way where it absolutely should not even be a consideration. This is dirt that's been turned over like 15 times, people. Why do we need to do this? It's crazy to me, and all of it is to check a box for a purpose that nobody can explain. So, cities, I feel for them, I really do. We have offered everything from, can we make this easy and just do one blanket permit and give you as-built when we're all done because we know how to build a network, up to and including, can we fund some staff so that we can help offload this burden? Because Edna's been on that permit desk for 40 years. She's not going to process more than 5 permits in a week. And I don't want this woman to quit when I dump this project on her.
Yes. Kudos to Edna for all she's done, but you need a few more. Pamela.
Yeah, sometimes Edna has that decision latency, right? It just sits there and effectively denied because it doesn't move forward. I think what Jessica's saying really is what we've experienced for our ARPA programs. We know how to build it. That's not the issue. The issue is the timeline. So we can have the funding, the engineering, the crews, the materials ready. But if we don't have all those permits lined up and the pole access and the local right-of-way reviews, and it's all unpredictable for when we get it, then the build timeline slips, right? And then we're up against an arbitrary deadline that's been created in a statute that Treasury's enacted for some of these projects that were broadband funded, where by the end of 2026, we have to have them done. And in fact, we're stuck with pole attachment make readies and replacements. And there's a lot of work that is stuck now behind those permitting gating factors that are in danger of not getting completed. And if this ARPA work isn't completed, the BEAD work sits on top of it. So think about the fact that we were constructing those networks and then to reach the next group of unserved and underserved in the BEAD funding. So that really puts those projects at risk. What I'm heartened about for BEAD is the prior attention to permitting and pole attachment and coordination at the local level, as well as trying to figure out how to deal with all the NEPA and the federal permitting issues. But I'm heartened that there's attention to it now for BEAD. We're still stuck trying to work through all the stuff that's stuck in the build process right now for ARPA.
Gotcha. Okay. Brad, anything to add there?
Yeah, so absolutely concerned about timelines and fulfilling these, especially when some of the programs may have as much as punitive clawbacks if you miss it. And this is just one aspect, right? We have supply chain, we have workforce shortage. And so we can't address some of those others until we feel confident that our timelines on permitting are hitting certain marks. Because where am I going to store all the fiber? Where am I going to store all the conduit? When am I going to ramp up with my workforce? If I'm not going to have a permit for 6 months, when do I hire the workforce, right? I forgot one word on people that we're afraid to pull permits with, and that's canals. Yeah, they could be as bad as a railroad. So, but yeah, that would be my addition. This is one small segment, but it's the beginning of it. Until we have confidence in the permitting, I'm not comfortable in going out and hiring additional workforce and doing those things. And then if it, everything just kind of snowballs.
Yeah, and I could keep you here for 3 hours talking about the whole bundle of issues that you mentioned there, Brad, but I'm going to be kind and keep it focused on permitting for the moment. So let's shift gears and talk a little bit about what reforms are most needed. We hear a lot about shot clocks, cost-based fees. Would love to hear what reforms you guys think would make the most impact and why. Are you optimistic about some of the legislation passed by and moving through Congress? Brad, I'm going to start with you for this one. And I want to also throw in that cities, towns, counties, or organizations representing, some of them have opposed some legislation in Congress. They've called out shot clocks and cost-based fees in particular as detrimental and ultimately leading to roads and residents being harmed. Is there any merit to those concerns? What does that come down to? And again, what reforms do you think are most needed?
Yeah. So with the mayor hat on, I really do like.
You're actually wearing a CentraCom hat, just for the
I,
record. But
I should get a mayor hat too, so I can put it on and actually switch them out.
absolutely.
Yeah, there is certain things I really would like to see in the dig once, and we put extra conduits in, and we do all of these things, and we work together. Yeah, they're very conflicting jobs at times, but they're also very complementary as well, right? The economic development of my rural community is probably more dependent on high speed broadband, rural telehealth. The closest good, the closest trauma hospital is how far away, the closest specialty doctor is how far away. So we got to work together and solve it. And it makes it easier when it's the same office that we're working together in a supportive council. When you ask about legislation, Barrasso, sorry, that some language that we've seen is good, right? It's a great start. The farm bill a little while back, we got previously disturbed. I'd love to see previously analyzed as a term we use more than previously disturbed. So I am very hopeful. Once again, let's get it in place, and then let's actually see the ability to implement it reasonably. And we need to be advocating locally as well on state. We have public service commissions at the state level, and if we have challenges with the power companies and our pull attach, we need non-discriminatory pull attach stuff that needs to happen at the state level. So we're hitting all of the angles, and I love that BEAD brought about more active broadband offices that become partners that I think really are helping us do some of these things.
That's a good point, because so that knowledge is needed. That understanding of the issues is needed. If, poor Edna, who knows where she started her career. So, Pamela, coming to you next about what reforms you think are needed most, and then Jessica.
Yeah, so I'm heartened that the level of attention to the issues has been heightened, not just with NTIA and the state broadband offices and the BEAD program, but there were 30 plus bills introduced in the House trying to address permitting reform issues. So I think the attention is there. If I focus back on what causes the delay happens when we don't know the requirements, we don't know why it was rejected, there's no transparency. And I even got an investor-owned utility that's pretty large, but is still using paper applications. And so the passing back and forth of driving in and dropping off paper and going back to check is not an efficient process. So I think if I could focus on the things that make a difference, maybe this is where AI could lean in and help set up some systems where we have some electronic transfer of materials, where we have a database where we can check, like, did my permit get processed? Is it stuck somewhere? Do I need to follow up? Did they get my payment? Visibility and transparency throughout the permit status tracking so that we can understand whether we need to escalate it. And if so, who do we escalate it to? And then if you take that transparency and more robust, bring it into the current century with technology, but also align that with, we understand what the permit timeframes are and what the detail is and why it was denied. I think those kinds of things, when you pull in the entire ecosystem to be pulling in the same direction and having conversations about the status of the projects, I think that could be very helpful.
Okay, great. Jessica?
Everything Pamela and I have already said, and I couldn't agree more about having common platforms. If we could just find a way to use the GIS tools that we all are using to design our networks and information using those same systems, oh my goodness, we could cut days, if not months, out of our timelines. But I want to take the conversation just a little bit to the side here. You talked about cost-based permitting and how cities have pushed back on it, but we're seeing a new sort of nirvana in franchise fees, right? Cities, before you can even pull a permit, they're requiring right-of-way agreements that commit the provider to providing gross receipts-based revenues to the city on a in perpetuity basis for the life of that agreement. We're talking about 7% gross revenues that on the most valuable asset in terms of your communication systems that your city is going to use, your community is going to have access to, that scales over time, you're going to tax it at a rate that you are not going to tax cellular. You're not going to tax fixed wireless. Lower satellite is never going to pay it. So why are we doing this? Like,
Right.
it makes no sense to me at all. And it becomes a barrier for us to even get into that permit queue. So having a conversation about what the real need is, if the real need is the city needs money to buy the systems so that we can have better permitting, I'm totally okay with that, right? That makes sense to me. But make sure you're charging all of us the same.
Yeah.
Right? Don't just come after me, charge everyone, because we're all benefiting from this system. We haven't gotten to a point where the cities are having that conversation with us. And I really do think that Congress probably could have a really big effect with a small modification to the Internet Tax Freedom Act that makes it clear things that are not cost-based, including flat fees or gross receipts taxes or per linear foot fees, those are not okay. That's not what we're intending to do as we're trying to close the digital divide.
Great points, all of you. Just a quick follow-up. Is it realistic that if Congress passes some of these bills and they get signed, that they'll be implemented in time to impact your remaining ARPA builds or even BEAD, given how long these things take? That can be for anyone.
So,
Brad's thinking.
Your silence speaks volumes. No.
No, I mean, I think I don't want to say the threat that it's passed or the knowledge that it's passed, and and we spend a lot of time educating the communities.
Mm-hmm.
Really, this isn't one where we're coming in as the third and fourth provider. We're coming in and we're doing the unserved and underserved areas, education going in ahead of time. It'll help, but once again, it's the wait and see, and unfortunately, we're still there. Or we start just plowing at 1 a.m. when nobody's watching. So
Right.
I'm joking, mostly. That has almost never happened.
Almost. All right. So final question for everybody then is there was some mentions of AI and the role that AI could play here. Jessica, you also mentioned GIS technology. The NTIA is obviously still just putting out, we're waiting for guidance on the use of the non-deployment funds in the BEAD program. I'm wondering if you all see an opportunity to use some of those funds towards some of these reforms, specifically using AI, not to replace Edna, certainly, but to help her or otherwise enhance what the city's already doing. Brad, let's start with you, then Jessica, and we'll have Pamela close us out.
Absolutely. I'm actually taking an AI class at MIT right now, and the overlap into rural broadband and some of these other things, I mean, the supply chain, the permitting, all of that's come up. And the ability, Jessica brought it up, we have all these GIS systems. If they were to integrate together, how much quicker would it be? Can AI provide the PE stamp? It probably can, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and the research that's involved, the time that it takes to actually go out and research to do, was it previously disturbed? Was it previously analyzed? What was the findings? I think there's a ton in AI engineering that can take place that really will help out a lot. The other part is understanding we're not putting gas lines and water lines in. What we're doing isn't dangerous. It going underneath a train track, it's not going to blow a train off the track. It's not going to weaken the surface that's there. But I think engineers sometimes take those same calculations when they look at us disrupting the ground underneath them. Whereas all of that, I think AI could handle. So yeah, that would be one perspective on the AI.
Excellent. Jessica?
Wholeheartedly would love to see us take that money and make investments for our cities that are going to benefit. It's what the intention of the money is for, right? To expand adoption of broadband. Well, if we can expand that adoption through creating systems within cities and not charging cities with figuring this out on their own, but providing them with a suite of options, and they kind of get to pick a blanket and it can be implemented using these funds. Oh my gosh. we could actually see something in my lifetime that means meaningful reform to the way municipalities are operating. And that just creates more economic opportunity for us all.
Excellent. Pamela.
And I think this is really a sweet spot where AI could lean in, right? AI is really good at designing processes and systems and aligning forms and making sure there's that transparency there. And I think NTIA has provided some framework and guidance for how to do it on a federal level. It becomes more complex when you get down to the state and local level because there are so many localities and counties and townships and even canals that have a say about right-of-way and waterway crossings. But if we can pull all of that information together, and I think AI can do that with the databases that it has access to even identify who the entities and parties are that you need to contact, that can go a long way to helping streamline some of the permitting and the requirements that we need. So, the entire country has made an investment in broadband deployment, and it's going to take more than just all of us trying to get it done. It's part of this whole ecosystem working together to try and close that digital divide, which means we need all of our permitting partners to sit with us and align with us. And I think AI might be one of that way, just to make sure that we have everybody identified and we can streamline some of those processes.
Awesome. Well, I could talk to you all for the rest of the day, but I'm too kind to do that to you. I want to thank you all for taking the time to chat with me today. This has been super informative and great. Good luck. I look forward to talking to you again once all these issues are solved and talking about how quickly your fiber networks are going in the ground now. Thank you all. Thank you, Pamela, Jessica, and Brad for joining me. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.